To order.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Janet Evans, Chair of the CA Board of Directors. Please remember that this meeting of the Board of Directors is being live streamed. You can find tonight's agenda and background materials on the CA Board's webpage. Links to these documents can also be found in the description section of the YouTube live stream. For those of you that are watching the meeting there. If you are virtual, please mute your microphones or phones unless you are speaking. Raise your hand to speak, and I will record names in the order in which I see them. If you are virtual, well, of course, please use the chat feature, and I would appreciate if board members can help me monitor the chat tonight. I'll do my best, but if I'm missing anyone, please speak up. As we move through the meeting, I'll introduce each item on the agenda. Before a vote's taken, I will restate a motion as well as who motioned and who seconded. And if at any point you have trouble hearing me or any other board member, please say so. Our timekeeper tonight is Lynn Egan. I will now call the roll. Andy.
Present.
Sherry.
Here.
Ginny.
Here.
Dick.
Here.
Lynn. I see you. Tina.
Here.
I see you too. Jess.
Here.
Eric.
Here.
Ashley let me know she is under the weather this evening, so wishing her the best. And she may end up listening in, but she will not be participating. Lakey.
Here.
I see Lakey.
Sorry, I said here.
Okay.
Okay. I'm like, I thought I had muted. Sorry.
It's all good. Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
So moved.
So
Second.
Dick moves, Jenny seconds. Any objections?
Oh, I would like to add one thing to the agenda. We had a letter that Russ Swaytek wanted us to take a look at and possibly send to the county delegation.
Dick, we have a very packed agenda tonight, and I think that it would benefit the letter as well as the board to have a little bit more time to prepare than that.
Can we definitely put it on the agenda for the next meeting? The delegation is in session. And so if we're going to have any impact at all, this is something that needs to be dealt with quickly.
So noted. Thank you. Okay, are there any objections to the agenda as it stands? Okay, thank you. Okay, next up we have our resident speak out. Residents are able to speak for 3 minutes. If you are speaking on behalf of an organization, you have 5 minutes, and I will read off. And Harry Dunbar and Lynn Robeson, I would just like to mention that if you are listed for resident speak out, then I will be calling on you. Otherwise, residents are not able to raise their hands during a meeting. So I just wanted to let you know that.
This is Sherman Helm. I have a question.
Well, Sherman, you're on my list for resident speak out. Do you want to wait till you're?
I just want to get a clarification.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Oh yeah, you're on there. Okay. So first up, we have Katrina Folks from PGM Family. Do we have Katrina on the line? Okay, well, we will come back to Katrina. Next, we have up Nathaniel Alston from the Ujamaa Business Roundtable. Do we have Nathaniel on the line? Okay. Moving on, we have Lynn Hannon. Do we have Lynn with us?
Yes, it shows up on the screen as Robeson.
Oh,
But I
gotcha.
got married after I did my Gmail account.
Gotcha. All right, you're up. You have
Okay.
3 minutes.
Thanks. My name is Lynn Robeson Hannon. I live on Sixpence Circle, and I'm here to urge you to fund the larger 2-tower option for the Sixpence tot lot. And you may think this is a minor matter, but it's very important to us in the community. My family moved here when my 2 sons were 6 and 8. They both were starting schools where they didn't know anyone, and they wouldn't use the smaller tot lots with the sandbox and the little caterpillar on a spring. But they loved the Sixpence tot lot because of the chain bridge, the larger, they called it a castle, and its setting near water and trees. And these unique features lent themselves to many imaginary opportunities that appealed to their age. Just as important to me, they met a lot of local children there of all ages while using the playground, and it was their introduction to the community, especially for those weekends outside of school. It was my introduction to the community as well. The Sixpence Playground acts as a hub for our community to get together. It's located at a crossroads and of pathways that connect to many larger and smaller streets and aren't far from the village center. And we've held our community block party there. We meet and greet neighbors there, and adults can speak to each other while different ages play. A design that can be used by older as well as younger children will ensure that the playground continues its important function as a neighborhood meeting place and a place outside of school hours where older children may go to get to know other children in the immediate area. The traditional tot lots that we see, like on Red Keel, they do not serve that same purpose. So I'm here to really support the larger playground option, and I want to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Lynn. Are there any questions for Lynn? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Jennifer Gervasi, or Gervasi. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Do we have Jennifer? Okay, then we will move on to Joel Horowitz. Joel, are you on the line?
Good evening. Hear me okay?
Yes.
Joel Horowitz. I live in Harpers Joyce. Before I speak about some of the legislation issues, the picture of the pre-treating pathway reminded me of an idea I'd had, particularly with the county, if they were with or without CA, could do this as well, to share their storm preparation plans, particularly about when they're pre-treating with the community in real time, to help encourage not wasting salt that runs into the streams, particularly where the storm that's coming a day or two is mixed with rain, which would wash the salt away, or when it's too cold to make salt being effective. Dealing with your memo on the legislation, I was quite disappointed that of all the bills that it mentioned that CA was tracking, it mentions the ones that don't apply to CA in Annapolis, but omitted Jen Terrasa's HB 93, which is specifically intended to deal only, well, principally with Columbia. Furthermore, dealing with some of the council legislation, it continues to misstate the effective date issue, because like the plastic utensil bill from last April, it uses the standard 61 days when all council bills generally go into effect under the charter. But as with the plastic utensil bill, it didn't go into effect until I think possibly it's July of this year, or I can't remember July or last week. The minimum wage bill, the 61 days is not the effective date practically of the bill. It's 8%, particularly as it applies to CA's minimum wage issues. Regarding HB 93, Delegate Terrassa knows that I appreciate the spirit of the bill. I had reached out to other delegates to deal with financial reporting, but I wasn't really in favor of the bill that has a lot of unintended consequences dealing with the state election code that it's not clear with, and I've shared some of the technical problems I've seen in the bill with the delegate. In particular, it doesn't really clearly deal with the Columbia Council rep because you're not a person on the governing body. As with your recent problem, and I had come to the conclusion that a Columbia Council rep, you could be a council rep but not be a member of CA. And this was confirmed when I recently found the articles from 2005 when David Halas was removed from the CA board, but the article mentioned would stay on as the Columbia Council. So in addition, I'm concerned with the criminal penalties in the state bill. And also I realize that if there's any one association that doesn't make any rules under the bill, the state board might have to make such regulations just for one or two HOAs, which I don't think, Delegate Terrassa, you're listening, has been considered as well.
Joel, you're at time, so if you could please wrap up.
That's it. I've shared this with some of the members and offline, so if anybody
Thank you.
talk later or has any questions, please ask.
Okay. Any questions for Joel? Okay. Thank you, Joel. Okay, next up we have Sherman Howell.
Okay, that's it. Sherman Howell, Vice President, African American Coalition of Howard County. And obviously I had asked others to appear also. So I may not be able to cover for you all's information. I may not be able to cover all that needs to be covered on the issue that I want to discuss. But I'm here to discuss tonight the racial gap in business ownership, the racial gap in business ownership in Howard County and Columbia, Maryland. And the African American Coalition is asking you all, the Columbia Board of Directors, to assist us in this manner. And you can assist us in this manner by enabling us to get some of the contracts that you all put out. Now, I'm just going to go over just a few things here. Hopefully I'll be much shorter than 5 minutes. Our nation faces a significant and growing gap between the wealth of whites and blacks. This is what is commonly called the wealth gap, and you all hear a lot about it. Business ownership is a route to wealth creation, a particularly important and valuable route in a capitalist economy, and we are in a capitalist economy. We can't ignore that. It is important to understand that the role that wealth plays in wealth creation for black people and black businesses in Columbia is not faring too well. It only can fare better with more blacks participating in business. And one way of blacks participating in more businesses is to getting contracts from CA. And we're not talking about this cash contract. We're talking about multi-year contract, which is what you find in building large buildings. But you don't necessarily have to build a large building. But just an example, it could be something other than that. Without these resources to draw upon, blacks cannot weather financial shocks in the future as needed by black families. Let's be clear here now. We're not talking about advocacy to build a program focusing on purchasing from black businesses in an attempt to combat the racial injustice suffered by the black community. We're not doing that. We're coming before you all to work with you all. But we do want to have you to understand that Howard County will not tolerate continuing spending the income of black families and not participating in the economy, the black economy in Howard County. And of course, you know, the average income, you don't know what it is. I think it's $110,000, but for blacks it's pretty high. I know, I don't normally do this. I'm really stretching this for me to tell you all, my family income is fairly substantial, exceeding a high number. We put it that way. Not the $400,000 that they deal with was in Washington, but it's pretty high. And I don't appreciate having to spend all of that money right here in Howard County and in Columbia. We like Howard County and Columbia, and not getting anything in exchange, not seeing black business thrive in Howard County. Now, like I say, before I get off of here, I'm willing to go and work with anybody on CA staff or CA volunteers, whatever, and we can detail this information out, provide you with a good basis upon which you can help us deal with the situation that blacks not participating at the level that they should be participating in black business in Columbia. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherman. Are there any questions for Sherman?
I would like to ask a question if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Tina.
Thank you. Mr. Howell, I wanted to ask if you would recommend to the CA board, or if the AACHC, excuse me, would recommend to the CA board that we renew our current policy or strengthen it in some way to route some of Columbia Association's spending to minority businesses?
Well, as I said, I thought I said that.
I just want to be clear in my mind.
Okay, I thought I said it. Maybe I should say it again. I thought it was clear in saying that we're not into minority, the word minority. We're into the word black. To be honest with you, I mean, let's be honest with you. I mean, when you say minority goes to women, that's where the African American Coalition is coming from. We've always come from that perspective. But yes, but we wanted to be changed, and we will work with you in any way you want to work, Tina. Change it, yes, to change the policy. The policy has to be changed, and we have to work together as a team to get that done. And I think it can be done. Jim Rouse, I mentioned before, Jim Rouse did it. When Jim Rouse was alive, we had a couple of them. One of them had a problem. I'll name it anyway. Oakland Mills, we had a laundry cleaner there, Oakland Mills. All the driveways, and they tell me, and Stephen Forrest and Thunder Hill were built by a black company. They built my driveway. And we also had a Bob was tied in with the NAACP. I know Virginia, I know Bob. But Bob, he's deceased, the late Bob, deceased. Bob was a big dirt hauling company, a huge dirt hauling, and he hauled all the dirt for Columbia. That's another black-owned contractor. And we also had a black-owned contractor.
Sherman, can you please wrap up your comments?
Okay. Wait a minute. We had several black-owned contractors. But to answer your question, yes. And we will work with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other questions for Sherman? All right. Thank you very much.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Next, we have Chad Demore from Inner Arbor Trust.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Chad Demore. I'm the Vice President of Operations for the Inner Arbor Trust. It's great to be here with you tonight and to see you, and even better to see so many of you in person in Symphony Woods over the summer and fall. The mission of the Inner Arbor Trust is to promote and nurture a park in a unique and natural setting for a variety of arts and cultural experiences that enrich the entire community. We're incredibly grateful for the partnership with the Columbia Association and hope to continue to build on this partnership for the good of the community and share our love of Symphony Woods. I'm here tonight to share with you our plans for 2022. Excuse me. My role is to oversee both our physical plant operations and lead the team as we execute programming at the Chrysalis and throughout Symphony Woods. We have exciting things to share with you as we both are enhancing the park for public enjoyment. So as we kind of move on, I just want to talk about some of the enhancements that we have coming up for 2022. We're excited to announce that in early spring, we'll be completing our 2021 conservation landscaping project that was in partnership with Howard EcoWorks, as well as installing benches throughout Symphony Woods. We're proud to announce that we've been awarded a grant from the Chesapeake Bay Trust for additional conservation landscaping, watershed improvements, and restoration. And we're developing the first set of wayfinding posts and signage this spring, which will make the space more inviting and navigable throughout the actual space itself and in the community downtown. As far as programming is concerned, our vision is focusing on providing accessible, free, and affordable programming for the entire community with a fundamental commitment to diversity, equity, and meaningful inclusion. This commitment to DEI is baked into basically everything we do and all the programming decisions we make. We're committed to celebrating the diversity of our community, showcasing diverse artists, and meeting the artistic needs of our diverse community. In 2022, we look forward to announcing a new partnership with the National Federation for the Blind. Along with NFB, we'll be presenting a no-cost concert for the entire community, specifically designed to welcome the blind and vision impaired. This concert will celebrate the artistic achievement of blind artists as well as provide a high-quality, truly inclusive experience for not only the blind and visually impaired, but the whole community. Our incredibly popular Chrysalis Kids series returns for 2022. We're planning 6 free-to-attend family programs, bringing back favorites such as our annual children's musical with Drama Learning Center. Our Chrysalis Cabaret series will also be returning in 2022 after being on hiatus due to COVID. These smaller events are on the Chrysalis stage and in the round and amplify our local artists focusing on jazz and soul and artists of color. Our community concerts is perhaps our most popular offering, and we plan on expanding that in 2022. In addition to audience favorites such as the orchestra, Cultura Planera, and some of the jazz that we offer, we plan to expand this series and add additional genres as well. And we'll be announcing these artists in late March. We'll be announcing the season. Some of the most important events that occur at the Chrysalis and in Symphony Woods are the festivals and cultural celebrations that we host. For 2022, we're looking forward to 4 cultural festivals, which celebrate the diversity of our community. We look forward to announcing more of those details in March as well. And finally, our team is working on a number of smaller events and activations to invite the community into Symphony Woods, not only throughout the year, but throughout the week. So in closing, I would like to just thank you for your time this evening, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have about programming for this year.
Thank you, Chad. Any questions for Chad? Okay, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Richard Bannister, and he's with Protect Our Streams Long Reach. Richard, are you on the line? Moving on, next up is Abby Hendricks. Do we have Abby with us?
I'm here.
Oh.
Hello?
Hi.
Oh,
how are
wait,
you?
sorry. Well, I'm sorry.
I think
Abby.
your other speaker may be here.
Yeah. Richard, is that you? Do we have Richard Bannister on the line?
I can't get on.
Are you on?
Am I on?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great.
Okay, you're up.
Oh. Can you see me?
Are you labeled as two?
Yeah.
There's a lot of feedback, though. I don't know if are you not able to get in through your computer audio? Can you click unmute?
Okay, let's see.
There we go. Yep, now we can hear you. Great. Oh, now we can't hear you again. We could hear you for 1 second. What did you just do to unmute?
Remuted me.
Okay. Maybe if you hold down your space bar, it will keep you unmuted.
Okay, now.
It's unmuted now, but it keeps muting me. So
Okay.
are we good?
We can hear you, so hopefully, fingers crossed.
Okay, thank you so much. So anyway, I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Protect Our Stream Longreach to ask the Columbia Association Board to reconsider their support for the Lake Alcorn Restoration Mitigation Project applied for by Davie Resource Group and its subsidiary, Wetland Studies and Solutions Incorporated. As you may have seen in your email boxes, in the board email boxes, I have sent each of you a copy of the statement I have submitted to the United States Corps of Engineers and the Maryland Department of the Environment in relation to that project for each of you to review. Tonight, I will lay out an abbreviated case as to why I think this project proposal is flawed and why I asked the CA Board to revisit their previous decision to approve the project. In the past, stream restorations or repairs within the Lake Alcorn watershed have followed detailed studies explaining the need for such restorations or repairs. These studies have helped management, board members, and residents assess the needs of the watershed and have enabled informed comment. This project has no such studies, and informed comment is not possible if the public and perhaps the board themselves are not accurately informed. In relation to this project, CA management, together with WSSI, have referenced the 2009 Columbia Watershed Management Plan. This plan makes many recommendations, but no reading of it could be interpreted to give a green light to the new CA policy of a 7-mile, 133-acre total restoration that flies in the face of all available previous studies. In fact, many of the recommendations in that plan have been implemented, so I am left wondering what happened. Did the 2009 recommendations result in failure? Is it the study that was at fault? Or is it that management did not follow through, so that now they are being entrusted to have another go, but this time with a project that uses bulldozers and other heavy equipment to remove the stream bed from its current course and result in the removal of acres of trees in that endeavor? CA management, together with WSSI, have claimed sediment is the #1 issue. Maybe the board is unaware of CA documents such as the 2016 Columbia Lake Sediment Management Plan that already details how CA is to resolve sediment issues over a 20-year period with 15 years still to go that will save CA $3 million over that time. Perhaps, like residents such as myself, the board was presented with misleading and sometimes false claims by management and WSSI. Perhaps, like residents like my neighbors, board members were given incomplete sets of facts on which to judge the Lake Alcorn project. Perhaps, like my fellow residents of Columbia, they were not provided a balanced or honest discussion that would have included not just the benefits, but also the risks of a stream restoration of this scale. Perhaps the board reasonably put their reliance on CA management and WSSI representatives. Maybe they too were shown a photo of a couple of old rusty pipes projecting out of a stream bank and were presented with a specious claim that they were from a gas line that had to be cut and plugged due to erosion. Were CA management and WSSI attempting to frighten residents and perhaps the board into supporting this proposal? Maybe the board is unaware that the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, the Sierra Club, the Patuxent River Keepers have all sent comments to the Army Corps and MDE opposing both parts of this proposal. Can CA continue to claim that this project is good for the environment when CBF, Sierra Club, and Patuxent River Keepers are all opposed to it? To conclude, Protect Our Stream Longreach are of the opinion that there are strong arguments against this project that need to be heard. If the board now concludes that they do not know all the facts and would like to know more about what we Protect Our Stream Longreach have learned, we would welcome the opportunity to help them in making an informed reconsideration of this project. I thank you for the time to make some of our opinions heard.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you for sending that. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have Abby Hendricks.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Thank you, Ms. Evans and members of the board for this opportunity. And I know you've got a lot in front of you as you consider where your funds are going to go. And I'm here tonight to speak in favor of the Inner Arbor Trust. As a member of the Oakland Mills community, it's one of the areas that I've gone to visit a lot over the past 2 years. Having a natural outdoor space is a benefit right now. All of the CA outdoor spaces, especially because COVID is here and it doesn't look like it's going to go away anytime soon. And so investment into those opportunities, I think, are really important. In addition to that, when we talk about the distribution of wealth in this county, one of the greatest things about the Inner Arbor Trust and the activities that they do is they often come free of charge. So what it is it's opening up music, it's opening up the arts to maybe families and children who can't afford to be able to go to a concert that may come at a bigger expense. So this grant, which is typically used to cover operational expenses, opens up the opportunity for more free opportunities for kids like my community. And Jenny being here, I know she does so much to support our Title I school and opportunities for students who can't afford it. I feel like that's the same thing that Inner Arbor Trust does when they do outreach to communities like ours to say, please come to our concerts. And they go through the music teachers as well as through the schools. I also wanted to speak it in terms not only of the benefit that it gives to my daughter as a 9-year-old, but I also was an organizer of HoCo Pride this year. And I will say that it was one of the best events I've ever worked with in planning that and being a part of that community that worked it. It was a lovely natural outdoor space, but more importantly, it was a safe space. It was a safe space for the people who organized. It was a safe space for the people who attended. And for the organizers that worked with Inner Arbor Trust that helped us make that a success, they shared the success with us because they wanted it to succeed as much as we did. So I know that you have a lot of decisions to make regarding this, but I do hope you consider funding that grant and consider not only what it's done for us in the past, but the opportunities in the future of adding in more community events as well as free events for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Ginny has her hand up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Abby, for your comments and for your work you did on the Howard County Pride event. It was phenomenal. And from what I understand, you may be making it better next year. If there is the next year for it, I hope.
Well, we are actually in the planning process of working with the Inner Arbor Trust again. It was a success and success in COVID, where again, people were wearing masks, it was safe, it was outdoors. And in an event like where we did at Centennial, it's not as private and safe as it is out there. So I think it was an added bonus.
And it's more centrally located. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Abby? Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
Okay, and last but not least, we have John D. Tomaso.
Pro.
There you go.
There we go. John D. Tomaso. I live in Stevens Forest, Oakland Mills Village. Been here for a long time. It's my second time coming to you in the last couple of months. Back in November, I wrote to Lakey Boyd asking about some questions I had regarding the dispute between CEA and DACA. And at that time, I eventually got a reply. It came from Mr. Anaton, who's apparently the counsel for you all at CA. I don't want to kind of go over everything again, but I guess I have to just repeat I had 3 questions. One, I asked about the legal fees that were spent. During this whole dispute, I kept hearing how CA had spent a tremendous amount of money and that it was basically wasted. And so I was curious. I am curious. I want to know, did we really spend a whole lot of money? I know that there was eventually an agreement that was reached. I wondered if part of the agreement got us any reimbursement for that. Now, I'm asking these questions as a lien payer, thinking, it's you guys represent me. It's my organization, basically. And I feel like I ought to be able to get answers to the questions. Mr. Anaton eventually wrote to me back in early December saying that the question of the legal fees was under advisement and was under review, and they were looking into it. I haven't heard anything. I don't know how long it is reasonable to wait for something like that. He also cited some case law and the real property according to the Maryland Code. I went in and looked at that, and I can't find anything that says I wouldn't be entitled to an unredacted copy of the agreement. But he claims that that case law makes it perfectly okay for CA to have entered into an agreement that is not privy to people like myself that are lien payers. So, I'm asking you, please, as council representatives, can you do something to help staff kind of push along this process? Let me know if you can tell me how much we spent on this whole disagreement. If I can get a copy of this agreement that was reached. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any questions? Okay, thank you for coming out tonight, John.
Okay.
Do we have any additional residents that were scheduled to speak that weren't on earlier? Okay, well, thank you to everyone who was able to join us tonight. We appreciate your input. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our work session topics. The first one is the extension of the Minority Business Enterprise Program policy.
So Pat O'Malley is going to share a presentation, but you received a memo in advance. I'll remind you that in July and August, we actually had part of our board content included a summary, kind of a year-over-year analysis and reporting, and we had some follow-up questions from the board that we provided the memo to. All of that has been posted online during that process, but I just want to remind everybody we've covered that content. So what's really in front of the board this evening is that it is expiring, due to expire April 30th of this year, and do we want to have an extension? Pat provided the memo that also demonstrates increased activity and certainly increased engagement that has happened in this fiscal year, the current fiscal year that we're in. And I just wanted to quickly share that I'm very proud of the additional effort that we have been able to move very quickly as I've come into the organization. And I have found our purchasing department, while very small, very eager to engage. And the summary that's included in your board packet and posted online demonstrates how much we've been able to move the needle even just in a short time with a real concentrated effort. So, Susan?
Yeah, so I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to just sort of talk through a few slides, and then Pat's here to provide greater expertise. But hopefully everyone will shortly see a picture of the lakefront.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, very good, thanks. Okay, so we, as Lakey mentioned, the policy includes a provision that was added by the board to make sure that it was revisited. So that's this the fact that the policy's got the sunset provision, but it was really to have the board have an opportunity to revisit that. So the policy would expire at the end of April, the end of this fiscal year, and staff's recommending that it be renewed for 10 more years. And that doesn't mean then that it would not be able to be changed or revisited, but just that to make sure that it continues and to make sure that there's a defined set opportunity to revisit it. So then we thought we would take the opportunity to give you an update on some of the additional things that we've done this year, and continue to have to be creative because all of these or activities, or most of them, have still been virtual. Our director served as a speaker in the Maryland PTAC, Procurement Technical Assistant Center webinar. There were 83 registrants, and he participated along with the purchasing team and the Equal Business Opportunity team from Howard County. There's a regional event of Baltimore County and the Baltimore Metropolitan Council, Meet the Primes. We participated in that. And then also just facilitating community connections, getting down to the sort of hyper local level and connecting the third and the network. Laura's really strong network of women of color owned businesses in Columbia to Howard County's Equal Opportunity Business Program Coordinator. So that had not occurred before we got involved. And then we also, under Lakey's leadership, took purchasing to the Howard County Fair and to the mall in Columbia's 50th anniversary. So getting on the ground, and in those cases, materials were available and people were present in person. So, so what that's done so far is we've had almost a 1/3 increase, a 33% increase in new MBE vendors year to date. So this is just 8 months of activity. Our average, we usually have about 40 MBE vendors a year. This is an additional 13, so that's quite an increase. And the spend, they have come on board, come into our process throughout the fiscal year. So throughout those 8 months and year to date, it's an additional $287,000 so far. And we're proud that the array of vendors and the services provided is pretty broad. So it's IT to A&E and construction services, etc. So those are the new additional vendors since May 1. And then we have.
Sorry to interrupt you. Do you want to take questions as you go, or would you prefer that we let you get through the slides and then take questions?
I'll just be probably 2 more minutes, so okay. If you don't mind, I'll just finish. Thank you. Yeah. And then, we have our ongoing efforts with CA purchasers. We just sent out again, or as a fresh reminder, Howard County's MBE vendor list and it's very detailed, has the contact information and types of goods and services to all our CA purchasers. And we're also meeting one-on-one with MBE vendors to really get to know them and make referrals to CA purchasers and programs for the goods and services that they provide. So just wanted to give an update, and I think that's it. Pat, is there anything that you would want to add before we take questions?
Nothing to add at this time. Thank you, Susan, for your presentation.
Certainly. All right. Thank you all. And I'll stop sharing my screen then.
Okay. Thanks. Sherry, you are up.
Okay, thank you. I really want to thank the efforts of the staff in moving ahead with this program. I think this is something that has really a tremendous opportunity to allow us to really fulfill our strategic objectives as far as diversity, equity, and inclusion. Back in 2011 and 12, when we first started to talk about this, and by the way, who was chair of the board in 2012? Anybody know? I was. Yeah. Yes, and I remember the discussion because I was part of writing this. But as I looked over the policy, and thank you so much for including the whole policy, there are two things that stand out, and this is sort of a mea culpa on my part and the part of the board at the time. One of the things we didn't include as I looked through this is a reporting function. So when I was away from the board from 2013 up until I think 2017, 18, when I came back on, and sort of expected that there would be a report back function. And when I asked for information about that, somehow we could just never get it on the calendar. There were other things that intruded. And then, of course, COVID. Enough said. So one of the things I would like to suggest about modifying this policy, and I do support extending it to 2032 as the staff has suggested. But there are two things I'd like to suggest, and I can make a motion to that effect after we discuss this, is that we add an annual report to the board of directors with metrics so that we really get to see the numbers every year, an annual report. And that I'd also like to ask that annual goals and objectives be presented to the board of directors in June of each year. And the reason I say June is because a new board comes on in May that will give an opportunity to really set some concrete and measurable goals and objectives for the year, and then to have that annual report. So I'd like to ask the board to think about whether we can add that to the policy. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry. Tina, did you have a question? Oh, and Sherry, I'm sorry, Tina, just one sec. I just wanted to say we won't be voting tonight, but I think those were excellent suggestions, and that we can figure out what we need to do to.
Okay, I can work on that also with anybody else on the board who wants to. Thank you.
Tina? I think Tina's
Sherry, I would love to work with you. I think, well, and yeah, and I'm assuming I can work my mute button tonight. It's an exciting prospect. It's the Monday. Thursday, you guys. I want to make sure that we pay close attention to the questions that the AACHC raised earlier, and really take that into account as we look to amend this policy. If we're going to have our hands in here, we can make it even stronger and even better as we move forward. Sherry, I love your two suggestions. I think they're brilliant. I think a reporting back function will be fantastic. I was really sad when we learned that in the 10 years, goodness, since you were chair and this policy was put in place, the CA staff not yet once met that the board had set. And I'm hoping under new leadership that is going to be changing. I think that the additional reporting that you suggest will go a long way towards making something like that more immediately apparent. I have a lot of faith in our current leadership to make things like that happen. And I want to honor what Mr. Howell says about, being aware that perhaps we need to parse the policy a little bit. I know in the federal case, there's a 23% goal, and there's a 5% set aside for 8As and a 5% set aside for women, and so there's subcategories underneath that, and I wonder if we can consider doing something similar, and really working on diversifying our supplier and our supply chain. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. Eric? Thanks, Tina.
Yeah, just a general question. So besides Sherry's proposed changes, are there any other changes that are different from what was currently in place?
What I just said about changing the numbers and parsing them down a little bit, I would want us to talk about that.
I think Eric may be referring to the extension of the policy.
Yeah, I was referring to the extension, not.
Oh, I beg your
future
pardon.
proposals,
I'm
just,
sorry.
Yeah,
My bad.
When the extension comes to vote, is the extension the exact same policy going forward, absent potential amendments, or is there some other changes that are in that extension?
So I'm not clear if that's a staff question. I just wanted to state, in case that is intended for staff, that the board had requested back when we reported on it and were saying that we were going to have the expiration date coming up, that the board had asked for it to be put on the agenda to extend. So the staff did not take any action to attempt to revamp the policy in any way. I do want to quickly say, for context, because I know we touched on this before, and certainly we can shape our own specific policy, but we do have quite a bit of it mirrors the Howard County policy. And I bring that up because it's important in terms of the size of our purchasing staff, and that we do not have, a large cadre of people to field a lot of the certification piece. And that's really what we depend on Howard County and or the state kind of agencies that have dedicated staff to that. So I do think that's an important piece just as we consider any modifications. But Eric, to answer your question, staff wasn't asked to evaluate and make suggestions. So the extension was the only thing in front of us.
Tina?
I'm wondering, is it possible to leverage the federal resources as well? The Small Business Administration certifies, great herds of people, or herds of businesses rather, and that may be another source to augment. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I shouldn't have. I think there was a lag in your feed. I should have more clearly stated if there are other certifications. So yes, federal would be included. Thank you. But we can make sure that's very clearly stated.
So Lakey, if there were board members that wanted to participate in helping to look at enhancements, recognizing that this is one, time sensitive, and two, that we did not ask for any enhancements at this point, are you open to that, and what would be the best process for that?
Well, we do have it on, our next voting meeting, but the expiration date is not, our next voting meeting. So I would say that if there is a desire for board to give more specific input or guidance, I would say that we would need to at least push it into the second meeting in February. I can convene with staff. I don't know. I would want to make sure that we have a concentrated either meeting or have some kind of written feedback from the board so that we can capture it at one time. I would not want it to be kind of in bits and pieces. So I would be open to that being, I don't know that we need to establish it as a subcommittee. Maybe it's just a quick one work group meeting where we hear very specific suggestions that board members want. And then we would have to bring it back to the board then to another work session to discuss before then voting on it. So I think that's doable and still make the April 30th, but there's no way to keep it on an agenda 2 weeks from now, I would not say. With the budget being on that same agenda, just as a reminder.
Great, thank you. We are out of time, but Dick, you're up, so you're the last one.
Yes, I think we can do this quickly at our next meeting. If there are any amendments that people want to offer, they can offer them at that time. And I think it's important to get this thing signed and done. And I'd be willing to listen to any amendments at that time, but let's get it over with.
Does anyone want to volunteer to assist Tina and Sherry? Okay, so Tina and Sherry, I will leave it to you and Ashley has joined us. Hey, Ashley, hope you're feeling better. Ashley would like to participate in that as well, so I will leave it to the three of you to coordinate. And I agree with Dick that ideally I know it's always a tight turnaround to try to get it in for future discussion, but let's take a look and see how, what I don't have the other agendas in front of me, but we'll have to take a look and see where we can fit additional discussion in if we're going to update that. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Next up, we have advisory committee appointments. So this was my complete lack of time this week. I was intending to send some thought-provoking questions out to the board. We talked about having this as an agenda item in the future, and we didn't have a lot of structure around it, which I think we can all agree does not go so well. So what I'd like to do tonight is, that we've allocated 10 minutes for this simply to get some input. So for anyone who is interested in providing an opinion, I'm going to give you 60 seconds. And I'd like you to, these are the things that I'd like you to think about. The purpose of our advisory committees, one of the things that Ginny and Lakey and I talked about was sort of the different nature of some of them. So for instance, Lakey very astutely broke it into essentially 3 groups: user groups, focus groups, and expertise. So like we look at watershed and climate committee, those have certain interest and expertise around them. Things like the, golf or tennis committees are primarily users providing feedback to our staff liaisons. And then, things like senior advisory and millennial groups are, how can we utilize them and what makes sense? Does it make sense to have those on an ongoing basis, or does that make sense to call them together like a focus group type of thing? So I'm just going to go down my list here, and if you would like to take your 60 seconds, I encourage you to do that. And if you do not want to, then you can pass. So Sherry, I'm just going to go straight down the list, okay? Okay. Well, you're second anyway, so Andy, you're up first.
I'll pass. Thanks.
Thank you, Andy. Okay, Sherry, you're up.
Okay, as I was looking over this, I was thinking that one of the things about the advisory groups that I think that's so important is when we have staff liaison working with the residents in these areas. And I think that this represents an opportunity to get more minority and underrepresented groups into leadership positions. It also offers our staff an opportunity to move into leadership positions within CA as liaison to these advisory groups. So there's sort of a win-win built into our way of looking at this if we see it as leadership development. And so I just want to throw that out there and think about expanding how we expand that leadership development. That is part of our strategic planning. Our plan that's
you're at 1 minute, Sherry. So
okay.
You can wrap it up.
I'm wrapped up.
Okay, thanks. All right, Ginny. Pass? Okay. Dick? Dick's gonna pass. Lynn?
I think briefly as representing a user group, I think I'd like to see more direct participation with CA within the user groups. We concentrate updating each section of each group in terms of what events they've done, how the courses are being managed, that kind of thing. We don't really get, I think, to some of the broader concerns that I think we're starting to really become more concerned about, which would be, again, just expanding the reach of the user groups. How do we include more people in their programs? How do we extend the programs to, more youth, that kind of thing. So I think there needs to be a defined purpose almost at the beginning of the year. What do we want to accomplish through these committees?
Okay, thank you. Okay, Tina.
Can I yield my 60 seconds to Sherry, who was saying all of the amazing things that I wanted to say?
Sherry, did you have additional?
Why don't you continue?
I think, you two
No,
can
you're-
feel free to discuss those opportunities when you meet for the minority business enterprise as well, because I think it aligns, right? So I strongly encourage
There
you
you
to.
go.
All right, Jess?
Sherry, I want to thank you for what you said and ditto and so on.
Thank you.
I don't have any comments right now.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, just quickly, I think we should look for opportunities to have these committees report back to the board and have better communications with the committees and the board.
Thank you. And if you have any suggestions for how that might work, please send them to me, because I think that is one of the things that was highlighted when we took the survey earlier this year, and it's kind of a regular, it's always a challenge. So I think if you have any suggestions, that'd be awesome. Ashley, I know you might not have a voice. Did you have anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, having been on the Millennial Committee, I do think it's important, kind of echoing what Lynn was saying. We need a way to keep funneling new people into it, right? And a variety of people into it, because not everybody has the time to volunteer regularly, and it starts to lose the momentum. So keeping membership up, I think, or participation should be a focus for each of the groups.
Thank you. Lakey, did you have anything you'd like to share?
You just highlighted, I was just going to remind everyone that we clearly heard back from the advisory committees in our changed format in July. And what I heard loud and clear was that they do not feel utilized by the board. They feel that they kind of convene for themselves. And again, I think for the user groups, that actually is somewhat appropriate. But there is both frustration as well as what was just being shared about just disengagement over time. So I think we have to understand not just a report, but they want to hear what the board values. And then when a decision is in front of the board around a topic, the idea would be that the timing would allow them to engage ahead, which means we have to be much more strategic in our agendas and what we're focusing on during board meetings.
Yeah, that's a great call out, actually. As we look at agendas coming up, if there's related advisory committees, then absolutely it would make sense to, one, bring them in, and two, get their feedback. Ginny?
Okay, thanks, Janet. Several months ago, I asked that we look at advisory committees, and the reason I asked was because of the issue of, I think we can do a better job in terms of getting more diversity on the committees, all different types of diversity. And what the issue is for me is the nomination process is all over the place with the advisory committees when you get a chance to look at this chart. And second, the confirmation process is also very confusing. Even some of the committees don't even realize what the real confirmation process is in their own charter. So I think that's an opportunity to really look at how we can maybe change, improve that process so that we will have a lot more opportunity for diversity on these committees. And that's why I raised it, I guess, 5 months ago. So this is a great opportunity for us.
Thanks, Jenny. Okay, so thank you everyone for playing along and for providing your inputs. I have a couple of follow-ups that I am going to think about, and then Tina and Sherry and hopefully Ashley, I hope you will take up that mantle as well when you're meeting to discuss the minority business enterprises, that you will also think about how we can better both, use advisory committees for leadership development and increase participation and representation. So thank you. All right, next on our agenda, we have our internal counsel for a training. So Wes, you are up.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to try to
This is sharing his screen. I will just do a quick reminder that we have hit the 60-day mark this week with Mr. Annington, and very excited to have him. Having in-house counsel has absolutely been extraordinarily helpful, and I just wanted to do a quick reminder that we had discussed as a board the need for ongoing training and just, a dedication to really staying refreshed and consistent with our knowledge. And we have someone in-house that actually has a good bit of training and teaching in his background as well. So we're going to leverage that on an interim basis.
Excellent. Thank you. Can everybody hear me, first of all? Yes. As like you said, I'm in my 60 days here with the Columbia Association. And I do sincerely want to thank all of you for giving me the time to make a legal presentation. In my experience, working as counsel for a couple of boards and commissions, I think it's vitally important that we always familiarize ourselves with applicable laws and regulations and refresh ourselves on those laws to make sure that we are operating as effectively as possible. Now, it is my understanding that each of you, when you became board members, that you did receive director training, and that you did receive some sort of insight into the fiduciary duties and other duties that are required of directors. So I'm fully aware of that. So
Wes, can I interrupt you? I'm
Yes.
sorry, but I see speaker view, presentation view. I don't see the slide. I see what I would see as a presenter,
okay.
like your notes and stuff.
You know, I did share with Lakey earlier that I'm not a big fan of PowerPoint anyway. I'm all about speaking to people, and one of the things today is that it's unfortunate that we have to do this virtually. I'd much rather be speaking to you guys in person, but those are the times we're in. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to speak to you. My slides truly were just highlights of the important words and phrases. So if you just listen to me speak, you're going to get everything that was on my slides. And what's more is that those slides will be shared with you later on for your review, if you wish. So as I was saying, and thank you for pointing that out, Lakey. So as I was saying, my intent tonight is certainly not to insult your intelligence. I know that you are all incredibly smart board members, but again, the idea is to consistently refresh ourselves on these ideas, on these legal theories, so that when we are engaging in our duties, we are engaging in our duties through the lens of what we need to do legally. And so tonight, I just want to refocus on fiduciary duties. I just want to make sure that we are all operating from the same understanding of the law. Just like in sports, we got to all make sure that we're working from the same rule book, right? So with that being said, as you all know, nonprofits, just like publicly traded companies, we are governed by various laws, statutes, regulations, and the governmental entities that are truly monitoring us are the state's attorney general. So in this case, Maryland State Attorney General's office and the IRS. They both play pivotal roles in monitoring us. And when we do not follow laws accordingly, when we do not adhere to, for example, in this case, our fiduciary duties, we do invite additional scrutiny on ourselves from the Attorney General's office and from the IRS, which we certainly do not want. And additional penalties can be received from the IRS. For example, the Maryland State Attorney General can also institute and levy penalties on us if we don't follow the rules and regulations properly. It can also affect our tax exempt status if we are not following the laws properly. And we could potentially lose our directors and officers insurance, which, as you all know, protects each and every one of us should we be sued personally for acts that we do while we are in the execution of our work duties. So all those are very important. And I'm just mentioning those as a few potential penalties. There are more, and this is obviously not to scare any of you, any of us, but it's just to put a lens on this, put this into context of why this is so important to refresh ourselves on at least annually, if not more. For example, if we're going to go through these 3 fiduciary duties, but if at some point anybody wanted to speak more to one particular duty, we could do that at a later date. And certainly, I will invite any of you, if you have a question later on about your fiduciary duties, certainly feel free to reach out to me. That's what I'm here for. And again, back to my point about not wanting to insult your intelligence. I do teach this at, I teach Introduction to Regulation and Compliance at American University Law School. And, one of the things I tell my students off the bat is, I know a lot of this stuff is going to sound common sense. And again, I know a lot of you know the basics of this, but the thing is, all you need to do is just Google governance failures or governance scandals. Just go ahead and Google it one of these days when you're just bored or don't have anything better to do, you're just curious. And you will see a myriad of cases come up from both the publicly traded sector and in the nonprofit sectors. And you will quickly see that even though it's common sense, these governance principles get violated all the time. I mean, there's and even in the past couple of years, we've had Volkswagen, Wells Fargo. Most recently, I'm sure that some of you have heard of, or maybe a few of you have been following the Theranos case, the Theranos trial. She's going to be going on for sentencing in about 8 months. All those cases on some level had governance failures. And when I'm talking about governance failures, I'm specifically speaking to these 3 fiduciary duties. And these are fiduciary duties. Do I have the ability to click to control that, Lakey?
I will flip the slides for you, Wes.
Oh, why, thank you.
This is the upside of the virtual meeting. I'm in front of my computer, so I pulled it up while you were talking.
No, I really do appreciate that. You can click through, go ahead, go forward one. So the 3 fiduciary duties are the duties of care, loyalty, and obedience, as you all know. Now, you can click to the next slide, please, Lakey. So each state has its own law that pertains to fiduciary duties. I will say that up front. But there's also the idea there's this common law level of fiduciary duties. And that's what I was talking to you about just now is loyalty, obedience, and care. Now, this is the Maryland state law that speaks specifically to fiduciary duties of directors. It's Maryland Code section 2-405.1C. And I will read to you specifically from it. Directors have a duty to act in good faith in a manner the director reasonably believes to be in the best interest of the corporation and with the care that an ordinary prudent person in a like position would use under similar circumstances. Now, if you were listening to that, or if you're looking at this slide, you will see that care is certainly mentioned, but obedience and loyalty are not explicitly mentioned. But this is where the whole common law idea comes into play, is that in that definition, in that law right there, as to what the director's duties are, those principles of loyalty and obedience are encapsulated in this law. And there is case law to the effect of the common law principles of all 3, care, loyalty, and duty. There's case law saying that Maryland does recognize those common law principles, even though they are not explicitly stated in this statute. So I hope that makes sense. And if anybody has any questions about that, I can explain further. But the bottom line is that care, loyalty, and obedience, those are the 3 fiduciary duties that we need to be focusing on. Next slide, please. So we'll start with this duty of care, which requires, as you can see there, it requires that you members act in good faith and as a reasonably prudent person would under similar circumstances. Like, what does that really mean? What that means is that you need to regularly participate in all governance activities. You need to prepare yourself for all governance activities, meaning you need to familiarize yourselves with the organization's finances and activities. You need to regularly participate in, or I should say, regularly attend and participate in meetings. You need to properly prepare for those meetings. And by preparing for those meetings, you need to make sure that you are properly informed for those meetings. And what does properly informed means? That means that you are reading any materials that you are provided by staff, by any outside experts or professionals, etc. It is important for you to know that it is certainly okay for you to obtain information from those outside the organization, if they are competent professionals, if they've been vetted, etc. So that's how you're preparing for these meetings. Now that might sound common sense, but we all know real life happens. Boom, we have a meeting coming up. You get a fat binder from Janet Lochran or whomever, and it's just got a ton of information in there. You may not want to look through it all, but that's your duty. And I'm not saying you got to go through it with a fine tooth comb, but it is your duty to read that material. Because that's what you signed up for when you ran for the position, right? I mean, that's part of what you're doing. You're saying, I'm going to take time out of my day to make sure that I'm properly informed so that I can make the best decisions, or the decisions that are best for the Columbia Association. Now, when you are becoming informed and you're informing yourself and you're doing your due diligence, even when you're relying on information that you've received from outside professionals, the CA staff, what have you, when it comes time to vote on any particular issue, it is important that you remember that you need to exercise your own independent judgment when you are making your decisions. So again, that doesn't mean you can't rely on the information that's given to you, but then you need to synthesize that information, you need to internalize it, and come up with your own independent conclusion. So when you're in the board meeting and it's time to vote, if you haven't read the information and you haven't kept yourself informed, you can't then nudge your neighbor, your colleague, and say, hey, what's this all about? You can't rely on their whispers in your ear, and you shouldn't then listen to them say, oh, I'm going to vote this way. You can go ahead too because I've read all the information. I know that's an extreme example, but hopefully you get my point. The idea is you're not supposed to be relying on anybody else's conclusions. You're not supposed to be relying on anybody else's beliefs, ideas, or what have you, because they have informed themselves. They are applying their own conclusions. Good for them. You need to do the same thing. Do not rely on them. Do not wait to see what anybody else is doing during the vote. You take that on. That is your duty. Okay? Any questions on that before I move on? Next slide. So the reason I put this slide in here is just to lend greater context. You're going to see a lot of this similar language in here. This slide is about the business judgment rule. This rule is actually, it actually protects directors. The idea here is that it protects the director's decision by limiting any judicial review of their decision should it get to that level. Like if somebody says that director made a terrible decision and I want to file a case against them, I want to file a complaint, what have you. If it goes to court, the court is there's going to be a presumption that the decision that was made by that director was made in good faith or was made on a good faith basis, that it was in the best interest of the organization, and that decision was made on an informed basis. That's the presumption. That's where the court is going to start. Now, in order for, I should say, when assessing whether or not a director was exercising or engaging their duty of care, they're going to ask three things, or they're going to assess three things. And again, you're going to recognize this language. They're going to assess whether the director was using all of the available and pertinent information, right, when they're making the decision, whether they were acting in good faith in furtherance of the organization's interests, and whether they were acting reasonably, or as in a reasonably prudent person would under similar circumstances, right? We literally just heard that language. So that's all the court is doing. And that's what all this is about with CARE, is making sure that you're participating, making sure that you are informed, making sure that you are operating in the best interests of the Columbia Association, and that you're acting reasonably. That's it. As far as the duty of care and the business judgment rule. So we can move on to the next slide, please. And now we're moving into the duty of loyalty. Again, it's one of those ideas that it sounds very common sense. All this does is it requires directors to act in the best interest of the corporation. We've heard that language again. It's a lot of this is repetitive, but you know, I think that bears the importance of it. And there's two big parts to this duty of loyalty. You're going to avoid or disclose conflicts of interest, or any appearance of a conflict of interest. And there's also a confidentiality component to this duty of loyalty. So let's start with conflicts of interest. Plain and simple, your primary loyalty needs to lie with the organization for whom you are a director. Now, I know this can get a bit complicated, and we're going to jump into that. For example, if you are a director on multiple boards, we'll get into that in a moment. But just the bottom line here is that your primary loyalties must lie with the organization for whom you are a director. And you must act in and not opposed to the best interest of that organization. Now, I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of what a good conflict of interest policy should look like. We have, the Columbia Association has a conflict of interest policy, and it's robust. But what I want to do right now is focus more on how we are to implement that policy. And the most important part of a conflict of interest, the conflict of interest component to the duty of loyalty, is disclosure, right? So, and I'll take this back to that example of if an individual works on, or as a director on multiple boards, that in and of itself is not necessarily a problem, right? There are many people that serve on multiple boards at the same time. But what we should be doing, what I know that we do, is that we do ask for our directors to disclose any potential conflicts. And so when you're asking somebody to disclose their potential conflicts, and this is important, you need to dig a little bit deeper. So it's not just the boards that you're on, but it's any companies that you might have an interest in, financial or familial interest in, because those companies might be doing business with the Columbia Association at some point. So you want to keep in mind more than just your other board interests that might turn into a conflict. You want to keep in mind any other business contacts or interests that you might have. You want to disclose those. Just be upfront about it. Because again, just being involved with those organizations or being involved with those boards is not the problem. The problem lies in when you're on another board, or you're on two boards, and a matter or an issue comes up that involves both boards. And at some point, either board they're diametrically opposed, okay? When that happens, that's what triggers the conflict of interest policy, a good conflict of interest policy. And so what happens is that the individual is supposed to disclose it. Now, hopefully they've disclosed up front a long time ago during their disclosure period that they're a part of this other organization. But even though the greater board might know this, it's still important for the board member to put it on the record, speak up, even though it may already be known. Just announce it again. Hey, I'm on X board, or I have an interest in X company. I believe there's a conflict of interest here, right? And then the board is supposed to take action by determining whether there is an actual conflict of interest in whatever matter. If they determine that there is not a conflict of interest, no problem, no harm, no foul. That member can then continue to engage in their duties as it pertains to that matter. If, however, the board determines that there is a conflict of interest, then the appropriate course of action is for that member to recuse himself from any voting, to recuse himself from any deliberation on the topic that's at hand. All right. I mean, that is the textbook way of handling a conflict of interest where there are where an individual serves on two boards. But the same approach occurs if there's a business interest, right? If I'm on a board and that board is potentially going to do business with a certain company, and I have a financial interest in that company, let's say I'm a shareholder in that company, or I'm an investor in that company, or if my wife works at that company, I need to disclose that to the board. And again, it's all about this culture of disclosure. Once I disclose it, then the board takes action. They deliberate on it. They determine, hey, is there actually a conflict of interest here? In certain instances, you can delegate that activity to a committee, maybe the audit committee. Maybe you develop a standing committee just for that moment to address whether or not there is actually a conflict or not. And then, just like I said, if there is, I've told you how to handle it. If there isn't, then there's no harm, no foul. The second part of the loyalty, the duty of loyalty, is confidentiality. The bottom line here, the bottom line up front for confidentiality is that it requires, in the regular course of business, that a director not disclose information about the corporation's legitimate activities unless they are already known to the public, or they're in public record, or some other law requires said disclosure. Otherwise, you're to keep it confidential.
Wes, are you interested in taking questions along the way, or do you want to?
Actually, I'm almost done. How am I doing on time, by the way?
You're at 22 minutes.
Okay, I'm almost done. So, and then I'll take a couple of questions at the end. You shouldn't be disclosing confidential or privileged communication, i.e. with your legal counsel, your general counsel, outside counsel, contract negotiations, etc. All right, I'll keep it at that since I'm at 22 minutes. And so next slide, please, Lakey. Thank you. And so the last fiduciary duty is the duty of obedience. This is, I don't have as much information to provide on the duty of obedience because it is quite, it's quite bare. It's, you as directors are required to be faithful to the organization's purpose and mission, as well as to the law. Bottom line, you just got to act consistently with your mission, and you have to adhere to the law. So my one last point with obedience as it pertains to the law is that goes back to the duty of care. You know, these all these duties, it's like a Venn diagram. They all are connected. And so when we're talking about obeying the law as part of your duty of obedience, I just want all of you to remember that when you see a statute, when you see a regulation, you shouldn't be looking at those statutes or regulations in a vacuum, because they are all informed by other laws and statutes, and they're also informed by case law. So I would encourage you all, when you see a law or you see a regulation that pertains to the Columbia Association, and it looks like a certain thing that the Columbia Association should or should not be doing a certain thing, or if individuals outside are coming to you saying, hey, you should or should not be doing a certain thing pursuant to the law, I'm not sitting here saying that individual is wrong, right? Or I'm not saying that your instincts are wrong. What I am saying is that there's a whole universe of law, and almost like that Venn diagram, they all impact each other. Case law impacts regulations, which impact statutes, and it's cyclical. So that's where that's what keeps lawyers in business, lawyers like me. So when you come across a law and you want to know its impact on the Columbia Association, please ask me. That's what I'm here for, and I will give you sound legal advice. And if again, I'm a general counsel, which means I'm a generalist, right? I've been practicing law for a long time, but I'm not an expert in every area of law, and I'm very aware of that. And that's why I routinely seek counsel from outside attorneys when I do not know a particular area of law, and I make sure not to waste our resources doing it, but there are certain times that call for me to do so. But the reason I do that, even myself as an attorney, is because I know the complexities that surround any given area of law and that you can't rely on just one area. So with that, I will conclude. Are there any, and like you, I really do truly appreciate you doing the driving for me there. Happy to take any questions, comments, or concerns at this time.
Yeah, we have Dick and then Jenny.
Hi, and Wes, good to know you've been with us 60 days and haven't left. It's a steep learning curve, and I'm really glad that you're here. We really needed a general counsel for a while now, and I'm impressed by what you've been doing.
Thank you, sir.
I got two issues here. One of the things is that we are in a slightly different situation than a lot of boards. We are involved with other organizations where we are required to be on their boards. Downtown Partnership, Inner Arbor, there's several others. And it is assumed that when we have that position, we're there because we are to represent CA. I mean, there might be an organization where we can make a major contributor, and part of the requirement for that contribution is that we have representation to make sure that our money is being spent well. I don't think that's something that you have on a lot of boards. In most cases where we're talking about conflict, if I owned a lawn mowing company and I started leaning on Dennis to use my company, that's an obvious conflict. That's a very obvious conflict of interest.
Right.
And so we do have this these special relationships. And your predecessor's point was that when you're on a board, you forget all your other boards and you're on that board. And for example, when our former president was on the Chamber of Commerce board, he wasn't there to represent CA, he was there to represent the Chamber of Commerce. And that certainly was not a situation that worked to CA's benefit. And there are other situations, as you're aware. So that's a place where we're going to really need some guidance. My position, not being a lawyer, is that when you are assigned to another board as a CA member, it is expected that you're representing CA. There's a corollary in business where an investor group.
Take your 3 minutes, so if you could wrap up.
Well, I'll come back with some other things, but I'm looking at a situation where there is a group of investors who want their members on a board to represent that group of investors. So there's some things there that I'm hoping will clear up for us, and then I'd like to get back to the end of the queue.
No, sure. And thank you for that, Dick. I'm as I've been getting my feet under me here at the Columbia Association. Yeah, I'm becoming very aware of some of these very unique relationships that we have. But certainly, I think, and that's why I wanted to give this this particular presentation today and start from square one about certain duties. I truly encourage you to seek me out if you know, for example, if you're on multiple boards and you know a certain topic is going to be discussed because it's on the agenda at the other board. If you have questions about whether or not you should be involved in deliberations, if you should be voting, please seek me out, because it's better to discuss these things up front than it is to discuss them after the fact. So thank you. I'm happy to be here to answer those questions for you as we go on, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Jenny?
Okay, thanks, Janet, and Wes, congratulations again on your 60th birthday or anniversary or whatever. Great to have you here. Two of the most important things I think that the CA board does is land use, which I guess easements actually is under land use as well, as taking positions on different development, et cetera, or supporting, opposing, whatever. So if I'm trying to understand what you meant by a conflict of interest. If I were to head a business or I head an organization, and I were to be either have gotten or getting contributions from a company that will benefit by my votes on land use or easements, should I, one, declare it, and two, recuse myself?
So just to make sure I'm understanding your question, if you, and again, I don't want to take up, and Janet, cut me off if you need to cut me off, because I'll be happy to take all these questions, individually at a later time. But yeah, if you have an interest in a company, and that
or an organization,
or an organization, right, and they're looking to do business with CA or in CA's vicinity, and your vote can potentially impact whether or not that company or organization gets that business or gets that relationship, then yeah, that poses a potential conflict of interest, and that's one of those ones that you'd want to disclose. And I'm saying that, and I'm using that word potential precisely, because just because it exists doesn't necessarily mean that it's a conflict. So what you're doing, that's why I said in my presentation, the important part here is being upfront and disclosing it. So then you present that to the board discusses it, and the board can say, you know what, we've heard it, thank you for bringing it to our attention. We don't believe that is a conflict of interest in this case. Obviously, hopefully you'll be seeking my counsel on that to make sure that we don't run afoul of the law, right? Or the board says, this is a conflict of interest. We can see that your vote, you might be biased. You might vote for this because you want it, because you have an interest there. And then in that case, yes, you would need to recuse yourself from voting. You would need to recuse yourself from deliberating on the matter.
Okay, let me clarify what I asked. I wasn't talking about my business or my organization. I was talking about if I am getting, as my business or my organization, contributions from a company or a business that is on their own approaching the CA board and asking for, and usually land use and easements are the big thing we deal with. There are other things too, but when you look at the whole, what we actually vote on, that impacts on others. They're contributing to me. So should I see that as a potential, as a conflict, not my potential, as a conflict of interest if I've gotten it in the past or if I get it in the now or in the future?
Out of an abundance of caution, it's something that you should at least disclose, right? Okay. And I won't say that I won't say right now that it's a conflict, but it's something that you should at least disclose, bring to the board's attention, so that we can address it to make sure that we are not leaving out anything.
Okay, that's what I thought you were saying. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we are over time, so Eric gets the last question. Eric, you're up.
Yeah. So do we have any unique responsibilities, given that we're not just on the CA board, but we're also on our village board, and we're basically representing our village on the CA board?
Oh. Yes, no, a great question. And that's one of those things, the whole conflict of interest aspect of the duty of loyalty, it is not a one slide type of thing. It's not a one size fits all. It is very much, you have to take them on a case by case basis, which goes back to the whole idea of disclosure is the big deal. So, like you said, all of you are on village boards that are dealing with various matters, right? Some of you are on Ann Arbor Trust, which are dealing with various matters. You might be on other boards. The bottom line is that if there comes a time when there's a matter that's discussed and there are CA's position, your position as representative for CA and your position as a representative for a village or for any other board, if they are in conflict, if they are opposed to one another, those interests, yes, you should disclose it, bring it up so that it can be addressed, so that we don't get into trouble later. Again, everything, bad news doesn't get better with time. It's like, if you wait and you're like, I'm thinking it might, I don't know, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. It's just going to get worse the more time that passes. It's better to deal with it up front. And that's what, you guys are a team as a board. You should want to discuss these matters with each other, to protect each other, to protect the the Columbia Association and our interests. That's why it's a team effort. I don't think we should be looking at conflicts of interest. I don't think we should be looking at it in a negative way. As a matter of fact, I think we should spin it and look at it as, hey, what do we need to do to make sure that we're protecting ourselves and CA from any potential liability down the road?
Thank you.
I hope that answers
so obviously, yeah, so there are going to be future trainings. So this isn't the last that you've heard of from Wes, and he will have additional, but you might want to be careful, Wes, in inviting questions, but I'm just wondering if there's a good way to corral those so that we can, because I'm sure there are multiple people with similar questions, and rather than sort of slam you with 10 of the same question or, variations on a theme, I don't know if there's a good solution for, can we create like I don't know. I'm asking Wes and Lakey, how you want to handle that. Because obviously these are really important questions, and things that we're facing as board members all the time. So, important to answer them, but I don't want to slam you.
I'll be happy to follow up separately. I mean, I think it's probably something like a standing open Google forum where we can start to have them in one place and maybe report it out regularly to the group, and just because, as you just said, somebody else likely has the same question, but we can discuss that in terms of the right tool and follow up with the board.
But excuse me, but the public hears these comments as well as the training, which is good. With that process, the public may not be aware of the questions or the answers, though. I'm just trying to think of why we're doing this at a public meeting now, which is good, and why I'm worried that the other process may not be public. I don't know if that just
certainly if the chair wants to dedicate time each month to have a training for the board and have open questions, we can allocate agenda time to do that.
We can discuss that at a future time. All right. Thank you, Wes, and thank you everyone for your questions. And we will follow up with the best way to corral that. And Jenny, to your point, I think, a lot of these questions, if we post them someplace, someone could go look at them if they were really super interested in finding out. We can talk about that. All right, next on our agenda is the community programs and services update.
Thank you. I have trouble saying that sometimes. It's still so new.
Yeah, I know. I think you could get a catchy acronym or something, and maybe.
Well, it's funny when we did come up with the acronym, and it's like CPS, and then I was like, but we have school aid services. CPS doesn't necessarily fit, but that's what it is. It's CPS, and that's what we're rolling with. We're owning it. Let me share my screen. Oh, I got an error.
Lakey's a pro.
I got.
I had all.
I'll get right on it, Dan.
Brain technology.
Right here with my mouse.
This is actually intentional, just to see if I can get Lakey to put that for me too. Okay. I was trying to do it on my laptop so I could do both at the same time and see people's faces, but it didn't work. We're going to kind of literally go around the world here tonight and talk about all the great things the team is doing and all the different areas that we're serving the community with. First up is Youth and Teen with our School Aid Services program. The program has been running strong, although, and this is a theme, has been very short-staffed. The team has been doing a heroic effort in keeping the program running. We actually offered our last open director position to someone today, so hopefully we'll have all of our director positions filled here soon, which is a huge step forward. Big thanks to Monica and her team and Danica with the communications on upping the recruiting. It's been very beneficial. That after we moved out of aquatics and the lifeguards over the summer, we moved right into school aid services as being the two programs that were extremely short-staffed. We're currently running them in all 20 schools. We do have the capacity limited to 30 students due to COVID restrictions and staffing shortages in some places. For reference, the size of, depending on the actual school, can go from 30 to 105. So at the end of the day, we're running at about half capacity. I mentioned previously that we had gotten an $862,000 grant from the State Department of Education. That has become very beneficial. The team has been using it a lot for staff incentives, for existing staff, retention bonuses, for all the hard work they're doing. They have been working nonstop, as well as incentives for new staff, and it has been working, as well as buying the cleaning and operating supplies we need and adding new programs to the services. The Youth and Teen Center at the Barn. This one has been a challenge with staffing as well, although, and this is also a theme, we made an offer to someone to help Renee, and we're waiting to hear back on their official acceptance to get the Teen Center open full time. So if that happens, then we'll be able to work here very shortly to get regular programming back at the Youth and Teen Center. We have been doing Teen Tuesday night tongue twister here for middle and high schoolers. That's been going off on the second Tuesday of each month. That has been seen some good attendance. They are also offering Dance Solutions Outreach, Youth Outreach. It's leadership through hip hop dance. We did a 3-week test program that went really well. So we've launched into the first of our 2 6-week sessions. Started last Monday, but it was snowed out. So the first real session was this Monday. And that's been very popular, and we're excited to have that. The Youth and Teen Center at the Barn is also serving as a distribution site for the Columbia Community Care food distribution program. It's somebody they partner with every year as Columbia Community Care needs to move indoors to continue with their distribution of food to the community. Camps, I know it's a little early. We are going to run 3 camps this summer. We're going to run the Extreme Camp, Art Camp, and Nature Camp. So right now we started recruiting for our part-time seasonal camps coordinator. We've talked to some of the staff that had been previously with our camps department, so we may have some experience coming back to get that moving along. And also kind of tied into this, we're looking at potentially another grant through the state that might allow us to utilize the school aid services team to operate the camps over the summer and use that grant funding to support the camps. So we're in the process of applying for that now. And Leslie Barnett has done a great job, and Jennifer Harding and Michelle Heflin in locating the grants and then going after them and getting them. That team has done a really good job with that. If they get this grant, that would be close to $1 million in grants for their programs. That's pretty substantial. Moving on to arts and culture. The Art Center, currently there's this great show. If you haven't seen it, it's there until the 28th of January. It's in partnership with the Howard County Public Schools. Students from K through 12 created artwork for the gallery show entitled First Impressions, the Fine Art of Printmaking. Well worth going and visiting and checking out. And the Art Center is also preparing for a February show featuring Black artists in honor of Black History Month. So really ramping up the shows there and the activities that are on feature. International Exchange and Multicultural Programs continues to offer the World Language Cafes on the 4th Tuesdays at the 50 Plus Center at the East Columbia Library, although the library is going to be closed this 4th Thursday. The 50 Plus Center is going to be closed, so they're going to do it virtually. With the lack of physical exchanges due to COVID, they have been working on virtual EPALs between the French and Spanish students with Howard County students, and they're working on getting the same EPAL system in place with some Chinese exchange students as well to keep the students connected until we can start traveling again. Grace is also organizing programs for February at each of the 3 fitness facilities to highlight the cultural diversity of Columbia and Howard County. And what she's going to do is they're going to take one of the group fitness classes that revolves around dance and replace that with a dance fitness activity that's based around one of these cultural dances and representations to share that with the community. In addition to that, the Columbia, Maryland Archives, I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit. The Art Center, the Grace with the International Exchange, and Aaron at the Columbia, Maryland Archives, what we talked about is they're going to create a rotating exhibition that highlights the features of each of those 3 areas, and we're going to place them in the 3 fitness facilities. They'll probably live there for a couple weeks each time and then rotate through, just so we can expose each of those to a lot more people and let people know about these great activities that are going on. We're targeting March for that. Erin needs a little time to get her story together, but we're really excited about that and being able to expose that across a lot more people. Speaking of Erin in the Columbia, Maryland Archives, 2 great things coming up in February. On February 1st, the archives will be launching a new online exhibit and subject guide on the digital catalog website to celebrate Black History Month. Very excited about that. And then she's going to be hosting a webinar with the Howard County Library System titled Treasure Hunt for History, really teaching people how to use the archives and how to find things and request more information about it so we can get more traction there. We've actually also just got Erin an assistant. So it's not all about needing to hire people. We actually are hiring some people so we can begin processing the backlog of materials that she needs to get into the archives, and then continue her process of digitizing what we have so people can access it. I can take Lynn's questions now because I'm kind of in that. I saw Lynn had a question.
Oh, no, it wasn't a question. I'm bad at the chat. I was just saying I loved your ideas about the multicultural things. It's a great expansion.
Well, I tell you what, Grace is a force of nature. You give her the opportunity, she's going to do a program, and we just mentioned the opportunity, and she's been nonstop. So
yeah, that's great.
Jess has a question, Dan.
Yeah, just a very quick clarifying question. You mentioned at the beginning that School Age Services, you had, you had reduced the numbers to 30 kids per school because of COVID. What were the numbers pre-COVID? What was the capacity?
They ranged anywhere from 30 to 105, depending on the school.
Okay, but now all the schools are at 30?
Yeah. If we average it out, we're at about 50% of capacity.
Okay, that's all. That was my only question.
Sherry?
Yep.
Yeah, Dan, where the archives are concerned, is it possible to use volunteers from the community to help out in the archives?
We already do.
Oh, okay.
We have a healthy cadre of volunteers who support the archives. And actually, the person that Erin hired had been volunteering.
Okay. All right. That's great. Because I think so many people are interested in that area. We have folks who have great background. They get a great sense of joy around that. So thanks.
There's always people in there. She She has a great little, just like Grace. Grace and Aaron have little volunteer armies that keep them going.
Dan, I had a similar question about the teen center. It just seemed like, they always have a lot of activities going on. I realize that there's probably clearances required for working with kids, but I didn't know if there were ever if they ever accepted volunteers to lead individual, certain events or something, I know they used to collect business clothing for, people who needed it, or, they used to have different activities.
Yeah, I'm going to answer this in kind of a medium way. Yes, I'm sure we can use volunteers, but since it hasn't been open, I'm not 100% sure about all the details of past operations. Renee has been doing a lot of work with the school age services and filling in. So I can't specifically answer to the extent to which we have used volunteers, but we use volunteers in a lot of areas. We never turn down help. Okay, and then aquatics. Of course, we're going to start here with hiring because the summer season is right around the corner, despite what the weatherman tells us. We are in the midst of hiring for the summer. Applications are pacing close to 2020, but behind 2019. I met with Marty Wednesday. All of our positions are at 2019, at the total for 2019 already, except for new lifeguards. Significantly behind, what he's finding is that a lot of teams haven't started the vaccination process yet. So they're going to get it and get started. So we know they're there. We just have to wait for that to get them into the system and get them working. Now, I just do want to say that even though we're pacing close, or we're at 2020, that was for 15 pools, ultimately 16. So we do have some ways to go for all 23. But we are cautiously optimistic. Tina?
I just wanted to thank you for having the job fair at Wild Lake High.
That was a collaboration, and it was great. We had about 130 kids who put their name in the hat.
Hot diggity.
Excited about that, and so we're beginning that process right away. It was great, and we have more to come. On a little bit of a programming side, our swim lessons, I think this was a conversation a couple weeks ago at one of the budget meetings. Swim lessons sold out in 9 minutes. Like anything, we're recruiting more staff so we can hire more instructors and get more slots open. But the swim lessons have been very popular over the last year. The team has done a really good job of upgrading the swim lessons. And then obviously going along with opening the pools for the outdoor summer season is the capital projects. It takes a lot of work from the capital team, the construction team, as well as our maintenance guys to get those pools open and ready for summer. Sports, golf, still actually kind of busy, believe it or not. As soon as there's clear weather, the golfers are out there. But we do have indoor golf with our computerized golf simulators going at both clubs. Learn to skate at the ice rink has over 400, actually it's closer to 500 now, participants. We always get a huge bump in an Olympic year, but as Lakey and I were talking about earlier today, we really haven't even started advertising the Olympics yet, but the program is just filling up. So we're really looking forward to the next couple sessions there. Same with tennis. Tennis has over 500 participants registered for our winter programs, both in adult and junior. They have continue to be extremely popular. And we have been keeping Owen Brown Tennis open on a limited basis. We usually close all the outdoor facilities in October. And then we ran It's right smack into the snow at the beginning of January. So that's been an extremely limited basis the last couple of weeks. And then in wellness and fitness, Tribe is going through its second largest season ever, which is great, really popular, really exciting. We're up to more than 180 group fitness classes each week. We've added 2 new classes of the very popular Les Mills programs. Everybody loves Body Pump if you're a group fitness person. Basketball and racquetball leagues are back, of course, with the mask mandates, but the members are excited to have those back. And we're back to offering our Friday team glow skate to give the team something to do on a Friday night rather than be outside in the cold. And that was a quick trip around the world.
Ton of information, Dan. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Awesome. Thank you, Dan. All right, next up, we have community operations update.
Thank you. So first up, we have renamed the maintenance facility the Community Operations Center. And there's so much more that happens in that building. There's watershed management, energy management, capital construction, real estate services, open space maintenance, facility maintenance. So heretofore, the world headquarters for community operations will be at 9450 Gerwig Lane. We replaced the stair treads at the Columbia Gym, and we really put in some heavy-duty material. And you look at the stuff and you say, this will never wear out. But with hundreds of thousands of people going up and down the steps over the course of a couple of years, it does wear out. It does need to be replaced. We're in the middle of a renovation at the Faulkner Ridge Pool, redoing the showers, cleaning the place up a little bit, in addition to which we are creating an ADA accessible entrance to the restrooms. The restrooms will not be 100% ADA accessible, but there's different levels of disabilities, and we're moving in that direction. We're going to spend about $25,000 replacing deck boards at Town Center. And what's interesting, these are not your typical backyard deck boards that are 5/4 inch thick. These are full 3/4 inch thick deck boards. And the amount of traffic we have down there and the weather, of course, wear those out. So we're in the process of doing some work down there. Murray Hill Road will be refurbished. We're going to spend, we think, about $30,000 depending on what we get into when we open that up. But that'll be for a replacement for the swing, remulching, and just generally cleaning that place up. So really excited. We have Weed Warriors on wheels. And I don't know if you can see that closely in Long Reach, but that gives them a great deal more flexibility in getting out into the open space. It's really an exciting program. And they, of course, did that on their own, but we're really excited. We have probably about 300 active participants in the Weed Warrior program and probably 20 to 25 events in a normal year. We also did some tree planting in Long Reach. We put about 40 trees in with the help of some volunteers. So we're in the process preparing for summer events, and that is an exciting process. And so I'll give you one example. For July 4th, we're planning a race, starting the event with a race, which will begin at Colorburst Park and end at Merriweather. Then we're going to move into what we hope is a naturalization ceremony at Merriweather. And then we're going to go from there to a multicultural event at the Chrysalis. And from there, we're hoping to get the band to lead everyone down to the lakefront for some music and some food. And of course, at the end, there's fireworks. And so in order to pull that together, I convened a meeting of various community partners, which included IAT and MENA, the Downtown Columbia Partnership, Ian Kennedy and Philip, the Columbia Festival of the Arts staff, Luminous, Howard Hughes, and of course the famous Grace Chang was there as well, and talking to Howard County. So it's a little bit like herding cats. But it's an exciting program, and I think we're going to try to activate the entire downtown for that day. And we're excited about the race and really excited about the naturalization ceremony. So snow removal, it's exciting stuff. We might get some more snow this weekend. we put about 1,000 hours into all the various snow removal that we did over the course of the last 2 snows. What's exciting though is this is really exciting stuff, and of course it's exciting to me and my team, maybe not as exciting to you, but we are now spreading brine prior to storm events. And the advantage of that is it dramatically reduces the amount of material that you place on the pathway. It reduces the cost, and it allows us to get out there sometimes, well ahead of a storm, so that we're not crunched for time. We can put this thing down sooner than later. We had our first installation during the last snow event, and it was a fun process. Of course, we're brand new to it, but it was interesting because we had to adjust the flow rate because it was too high, and we kept saying, you got to go faster, you got to go faster. We got that worked out, but you have to see the video. It was just good fun for our team. And of course, we're putting in slippery when wet signs, which you would think would be an easy lift. But if you have more than 250 bridges in the open space, nothing is easy. There are 2 that are the same. And then the rest of them are different in terms of sight lines and how far apart they are. And I've got a quick little video that I'd like to show you. Okay, well, it doesn't look like I have a technical problem with the video, but it was a great video, and I'll share it with you guys by email. So with that, I can take questions.
Andy?
Yeah, Dan, Dennis, I just wanted to say I got a couple of good comments from my residents about how well you clean the paths.
I have one other comment which you guys will appreciate on snow removal. So I was at the Oakland Manor on Monday at about 12 o'clock, and it's 30 degrees. And there was a group of 4 women that were playing pickleball with snow pushed to the side of the court. It was the most amazing thing. And actually, I thought it was terrific. But I talked to Lynn, the village manager, later that day, and he said, "Yeah, we got to call One Grade when you're going to get out and clean the courts so people can play." And I told them the pathways come first. But anyway, it was really great to see people out there. It was literally 30 degrees, and snow was on the edge of the courts.
Well, I'm glad paths are prioritized.
Well, one of those women was my wife, so I know she was very appreciative also.
All right, Tina, you're up.
I just want to echo the gratitude. I heard from more than one person that, yeah, the paths were cleared before my road was. What the heck, Coward County? So, well, CA does a good job, so are my compliments.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to comment that 4th of July activity schedule sounds awesome, so that looks good. Anyone else have questions for Dennis?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, Dennis was faster than the agenda gave him. Do we have Delegate Teresa on the line? I texted her, but I gave her a 15-minute warning, so.
She's muted. She looks like she's on the line, but muted.
I wasn't sure.
Hello, sorry, I just got your text. I'm sorry, I was on another.
Well, it was a bait and switch,
You said 15 minutes and I was like, okay.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. So just as an introduction, I just wanted to say Delegate Teresa is here regarding the bill that she proposed, and I will let her provide the details, but I just wanted to give a little heads up.
And of course, right as we start, I realized that I don't have my notes. Okay, well, I'll just wing it. Okay. If you could give me 2 seconds here. Apparently,
yeah, absolutely.
These are not the right notes. Yeah, I think this is it. I don't know. Okay. Anyway, that's the problem.
Would you like to take a couple of minutes and we can see if there are questions on any of the other pre-filed legislation?
Yeah, if you could do that, I'm just gonna pull it up. I thought I had it right in the stack. I apologize, but I will in 2 seconds have it. Yeah, so if you want to do that, that'd probably be good.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Wes, I don't know if you have anything that you wanted to start with. This is generally questions only, but does anybody have any questions about any of the other pre-filed legislation that is currently on the list? Okay. All right. Well, then we'll just take a minute to.
I'll have it 2 seconds. It's right here.
Yeah.
It's in this file. Give me 2 seconds. Sorry about that. That is the first time that.
No worry. I didn't give you enough notice because I thought. We don't generally take less time than needed for agenda items.
Okay, here we go. I want to make sure I tell you everything that I wanted to tell you. Okay, so my bill is House Bill 93, and I know a lot of people have had questions of it. And really, the bottom line is the point is to bring transparency to elections at the local levels, and in the sense of campaign finance. So basically, what it does is require for cities and large common ownership communities, which includes HOAs, obviously, includes CA, and includes the villages, but not just those. I mean, the cutoff is 2,000 lots for community common ownership communities. So to the question, was this just aimed at CA? No. If I'd wanted to do that, I would have gone with 70,000 lots or a much higher amount. And it's to require people to have to just report where they got their money and what they're spending it on. So so that's basically what it does. Now, how does it work? The way it works is you could follow the complicated state system. You could get set up in a campaign committee. You could get a treasurer, file annual reports with the state, do all of those things. But really what my intent was to do was for the locals to set up a much simpler process. So what I've been recommending to the villages that I've talked to is that you set up something really simple. Something like, if it's a low dollar amount, like if you've only received, let's say, less than 1,000 or less than 500 or whatever you think the threshold could be. It could be less than 5,000. Whatever it is, in my experience, it's usually been pretty low. I never spent any money, but I didn't run for Columbia Council. I ran for Village Board. But whatever that threshold is, you say, well, if you're only bringing in less than that, write on a piece of paper, one piece of paper, here are all my donors, here's how much they gave, and on the second piece of paper, here are the things I spent it on. So signs, $200, whatever, $50, flyers, what have you. And that would be sort of my intent on how that might work. And so if you set up your own system, and like I said, it does not have to be a complicated system whatsoever, then all candidates would have to do is file that with you. Well, I guess actually, since your candidates run at the village level, they would file with the village. And then the candidate would just send a copy of whatever the village requires, just send a copy to the state. And the point of sending a copy to the state is so that everybody knows where to find it, right? So that if you're looking for campaign reports, if you're looking for how much did whoever get in campaign contributions, everybody knows where to find them. They're all in the same place, just like everybody else is. And one of the things that I found out when I was looking at this is that in Maryland, cities there's no statewide requirement for people running for city, like mayor or city council. There's no statewide requirement for them to have to people where their finances came from. And I thought that was somewhat alarming and surprising. Now, the way the law works right now is if they do have a requirement, let's say the city of Rockville, for example, has a requirement. So if Rockville has a requirement, their candidates have to file whatever that requirement is with Rockville, and they today have to send, not today, but when their reports are due, they send a copy to the state, just the way I was talking about. So that's basically it. It's not, the point is to set up a simplified system. So the question is, why not set just a simplified system up myself? Like, why didn't I just set up a simplified system so you guys don't each have to create those? Why didn't I do that at the state level? Well, the problem is that when you're looking at HOAs particularly, but also when you're looking at cities, all those elections happen at different places in different ways. So it's really very complicated to set that up at the state level. So that's why I created this option, which I thought was a really good option. That means local control of how you do this. Literally, you could say, use a notebook page and scribble down who gave you money. Or you could create your own form. Or you can make it much more complex. You want to know a lot more. That's really what the intent is. And I just want to address one other concern that I'd heard. A number of folks were worried about conflicts. Like if you had to report this, that conflicts of interest would come up. And what I would say, and I just want to make this really clear, conflicts of interest exist whether or not you have to report them. Reporting them in the way that I'm asking for them to be reported is just about transparency. It's about other people knowing about those conflicts. You have a conflict. If you have a conflict, you have a conflict. This is just about the transparency piece of it. So I hope you'll be supportive of it. I think it's a good idea. It's just merely a simple system to report those things. You could just skip over that and follow the state system, but I do think that's probably a burdensome system. I did use a minimum of 2,000 units because I didn't want to get at all of our little HOAs. Like I'm in Stone Ridge Community Association and there's 77 units here. And I didn't think it made sense to get into each one of those type of communities, but I did set a limit at 2,000. And cities, 3,000 voters, I believe is what I said, 5,000. Actually, I'm not sure. I'll have to look. It's on here somewhere on this great document that I did. Thank you for the time to pull it up. 5,000 residents. So I'll stop there, answer questions. I hope you'll be supportive of it. I think it's pretty simple. It's just about transparency.
Thank you. We have a bunch of questions for you, so we'll start with Dick.
Well, Jen, I really appreciate the fact that you're looking into this. This has been a serious problem recently, and it's nice to know that you're shedding some light on it. We had a talk the other day. I think I mentioned my concern about the independent LLCs who are pouring money in where you didn't really know who they were. And I know that's going to be a tough nut to crack, so good luck with that. I did see something that Joel had written this morning that I don't know if you saw that, but he, well, I could forward it to you. But it was
and he may have sent it to me, and I just didn't see it because I've been on Zoom since.
I'm not a lawyer, but it looked like it might solve that problem. But anyway, thanks for doing this. This is something we really need to pay some attention to.
Thank you.
Eric?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. And so I actually come from the perspective that I actually served as treasurer on the campaign committee. And I can say that it was a rather burdensome experience, especially dealing with keeping track of everything and also going through several audits even after the election was finished. The one thing I want to make sure is that we do want to make sure it's very streamlined, as you suggested. And so my main concern is, will this create too many burdens that will prevent residents from entering in races? Because right now, for a lot of our board positions, that it's hard to get people to volunteer to run. And so I want to make sure that this doesn't get in the way of people running. And the second concern I have is, reading the bill, it mentions people actually creating campaign committees. And one of the concerns I have is if candidates start creating campaign committees, this is going to encourage more spending on CA campaigns and HOA campaigns.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I agree. My intent would not be for you to get into that whole process. That's why my hope is that each village would just vote on a rule that says, submit a piece of paper with all your expenses. With all your donations and the name of the donor and how much it was. Submit another piece of paper with what you spent it on. So for example, if I was running for village board and I spent, $100, I'm going to date myself here and say flyers at Kinko's, which is back when I ran, so I would put on one sheet of paper, self-funded $100, and the other page, $100 of flyers is a lot, but you know what I'm saying? So on the other page, I would say spend $100 making copies of flyers. And that would be the whole entire thing. I could do that right now while I was on this call. And that would be my intent. I agree with you. We definitely don't want to have everybody standing up a campaign committee, getting a treasurer, filling out annual reports and doing all these other things. If they're not bringing in huge sums of money, if they're bringing in 30, 50, if you've got huge sums of money coming in, that might be another thing. So the village board could say, everybody just fill out a piece of paper. The village board could say, hey, if you're going to bring in more than $30,000, we think you should stand up a committee and fill out a form, follow the state system and deal with them. We don't want to deal with it. So it's whatever you want to do. It's whatever the village decides and to do in terms of those rules. But my recommendation would be to make it a very simplified system. It's just about transparency. It's not about trying to discourage people from running.
Okay, Andy?
Oh, thanks, Jen. Just one comment for you to think about. Could your legislation also authorize the HOAs to create and require these reports? But what I'm thinking is, in some HOAs, procedures governing elections are part of the bylaws.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would hate to have to try to modify the bylaws to go through that whole process.
Uh-huh.
If instead,
I gotcha.
Yeah, just something so that, because the other thing too is if I have to modify the bylaws, it's going to be a year or two to.
Okay. Let me make sure it doesn't have to be done through the bylaws. I gotcha.
Sure.
That's a good question, but I'll make sure that's not the case.
Thanks, Jen.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question.
Okay, Ginny?
Okay, thanks for coming, Jen. And Andy, that is a great point. Having been on the village board doing that is a great point. One, I just wanted to agree that this bill has nothing to do with conflict of interest. That's a separate issue. This is simply openness, transparency as to any campaign funding you've received that the public either does or doesn't have a right to that information. I think they do. They make their own decisions as to what that means. The concerns I have is one, $1,000 for a village board or a CA campaign. I don't know why you'd spend that much, but okay. I think it should be, if you even get or spend 500, you should have to report. I think it's much lower. It should be much lower. The second thing that seems to be missing here is in-kind contributions. We're talking about, you're only talking about if you get money, how you spend them. But there are campaigns that have occurred where people have received in-kind contributions. Things were done for them that benefited people in an election, but they may not have actually received the money. So that should be declared too. I think that's really important. The next thing, because I know we're running out of time here, I am. We have to keep in mind the reporting timeline. This is not like a county, state, city election. There's plenty of time. this is only probably a 6 to 8 week period. So the village boards have to really be allowed to require almost weekly reporting, or or you will not achieve the goal of transparency. Thanks, Jen, for trying to tackle this very important issue.
So I lost the point that you were making right before timeline. But the
About
timing,
in-kind
thank you, in kind.
Yeah,
Yeah, in kind is included.
It
In kind
is?
is considered a contribution. Yes.
So if somebody prints, we'll make up something, signs for you, you didn't actually, because you kept saying an expenditure you had. Well, I didn't actually have that expenditure. Somebody else did it. Or,
Right.
or glossy postcards. Somebody else did it for me. I didn't actually have that expenditure. So
Right.
it wouldn't be on my form that I'm,
Right. It won't be on your expenditure. It'll be on your donations. It would be a donation, an in-kind donation.
okay, even if I may or may not say I know who the source of that funding, but I still have to declare it.
Well, you'll know who. I mean, you're getting back to sort of the LLC or whatever issue that this doesn't touch, but you would know who printed out I mean, unless the signs just showed up on your door, you would know. I mean, I assume you would know who.
Well,
I don't think you can get an anonymous donation of signs. I can check on that, but my sense is that you would know who gave them to you, and whether or not you know the source of all their funds. I mean, that's sort of an issue of federal and state, and
So you're covering this, that it would also be what I'm talking about.
it would cover in-kind donations. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
But you also said reporting timeline. That's absolutely within the discretion of the village to come up with. And as I think you and I discussed, what the state does is have people do annual reports and then do frequent reports as you lead up to the election. You guys could do that or not do that. I would recommend it, but and I'm happy to work with anybody on that process. But and I know our Board of Elections, one of the folks at the Board of Elections that I work with is also happy to work with folks on coming up with a reasonable timeline, but it's really up to you.
Yeah, I think you've really offered that, and that's
Jenny,
good.
you're out of time. You can get back in the queue, but you're out of time.
Yeah, okay.
Tina?
Thank you, Erica. That question that you raised about the unintended consequence of having folks be less reluctant or be reluctant to run with such reporting requirements. I know in Wild Lake, we're having a hard time recruiting people to be on the board. Jen, I wanted to ask you about, is this prescriptive or permissive for a village board?
Prescriptive.
Do they have to do?
Well,
so they would have to write some kind of rules around fiscal reporting. They couldn't choose not to. They would have to.
Well, it's prescriptive in the sense that they don't have to write their own rules, but if they didn't, you'd have to be burdened. It would be a huge burden on candidates. So you'd want to, because basically what you'd have to do is follow the state much more burdensome system, and you wouldn't want your candidates to have to do that. But I mean, if your candidates, like for village board, for example, when I ran for village board, I didn't raise any funds to do that. So if you've got a candidate coming in, all you might require of that candidate is to sign a piece of paper saying, I didn't raise any money, right? I mean, that could be at the bottom of whatever candidacy form.
Sure.
But if they're raising
that's
funds,
one way to do it.
Yeah.
The village board, for example, that wanted to make things very complicated because they were concerned that those people, whoever those people are, could use this opportunity to power for themselves. If we were feeling deeply cynical, and you know, it's not surprising that people would be feeling cynical at this point. Okay, that helps me understand a little bit. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Eric?
Okay, is there any auditing requirements? Like when I was a treasurer for a candidate, there was fairly strict auditing requirements. Is that going to apply for these type of elections?
I don't recall auditing requirements of my campaign finance, but at any rate, it is whatever the village is creating. I'm not sure what maybe we could talk after. Unless you want to tell me more about that, I'm not sure I'm as familiar with that. So I'm not trying to avoid the question. I'm just not as familiar with the auditing.
Yeah, so
and I don't know.
yeah, for like a state election, if you're a DOE election and you have a campaign committee, that committee is subject to periodic audits by the state, and you have to. And actually, I did go back and forth a couple times submitting receipts back to the state as part of the audit. So I was wondering if there's some kind of auditing of. Would there be some kind of auditing of CA candidates in their budget?
I will check on that. I believe if you set up your own system, they're not getting involved whatsoever, but I will check on that. I'm also not familiar with that at the state level, but I also need to talk to my treasurer. Maybe it hasn't been as burdensome to her in that sense, and I just don't know about it, but I will find out. I'm not familiar with that, so I'll find out, but I can find that out. Right. My intent is not to make a complicated process. My intent is to make a very simplified process.
Jenny?
I can wait till Jess, if it's okay. She had her hand up before me.
Okay, Jess? Oh, you're muted, Jess. Jess, you're on mute.
My bad. I was so focused on lowering my hand that I forgot to unmute myself.
Well, for the record, if you unmute yourself, it will automatically lower your hand. So.
Well, thank you. That's good to know. So, Jen, you had mentioned that when you ran for village board that you didn't have any donations, right? And that was my experience most of the time that I've been involved with people running for village board. My concern with the legislation that you're proposing is that it's going to make it so that those who can self-fund their campaigns are going to have a much easier go of it than those that can't afford to do that. So like you mentioned, you know, if you're self-funding, you know, then you can just write on a piece of paper, yeah, I spent, you know, $200 of my own money on these signs. And then you turn that in and you're done. But if someone actually has to fundraise to match what you're able to self-fund, and they have to get $20 from this guy and $50 from this guy in order to spend $200 on signs, it creates a much greater burden on that person in terms of the reporting. And so my fear is that the unintended consequence will be that people will say, well, you know what, I'll just self-fund my campaign because it's not worth it to jump through all the hoops to get donations. And then it will be folks who can't do that will pay the price. So that's just my observation of what I think could be an unintended consequence of this. And I think the other problematic piece is the fact that, as you said, you're hoping that villages will come up with rules and then that will make it easier for candidates. But if they don't, then that person, as I read the bill, in order to receive a single donation, has to form an election committee. And again, that becomes a lot harder. So then certain villages, if the village is not setting those standards, then the people who are running in that village, it's going to be a lot harder for that village to fill their seat. So I just feel like there are some things that could happen that while I appreciate the intent of it, I don't know that it's worth the potential problems that could come from it. That's just my perspective.
I mean, should I comment? My only comment on that would be that I think transparency is incredibly important, and I have a lot of faith, having worked with the villages for so many years, that they'll come up with a pretty simplified system. And I guess having been on the village board, I'm not sure I'd find it very burdensome to make a list of, 10 donors, for example, or 20 donors, like, Mom, Jessica gave me this much, Jenny gave me this much, Tina gave me this, I mean, we're not talking about a huge accounting, you don't need an accountant for this. You just need to write down a list of what people, I mean, and if the villages don't do that, then they're not doing what they should be doing to recruit people. I mean, you know, that's why what you guys are all, what the village board members are there to do is to make better the villages and to hopefully also work to, when there's open seats, to recruit more members. And I know that's a tough go because I was on the village board for years. But I don't see creating transparency as a barrier to that. I see that as a more of an evening of the playing field and something that's beneficial to the whole community. But I appreciate your concerns about that.
Ginny and then Dick, and then we're hitting up against time. So if anyone who hasn't spoken would like to, please let me know.
Okay, two things. One, I'm hearing, you know, it'd be a real problem for somebody that would have to form an election committee. I don't hear you saying you have to form an election committee. It's just these simple forms you fill out, et cetera, especially if you only need $200-300. But what I was hoping would happen if this passes is the villages boards would all get together and try and reach an agreement on a very simplified process like you were explaining and come up with a one form for all of Columbia and the villages and make it simple. And that would apply to the CA board as well, since we're on the village boards. So that I think that would be, you know, an easy system that shouldn't put anyone at a disadvantage. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dick?
Well, just to address Jessamyn's question, if you have to go door to door to collect $50 or whatever to run, you're spending more time collecting money than it takes to write it down on a sheet of paper. So I don't see that that's a problem at all.
Okay. Well, thank you for being with us tonight, Jen, and for explaining the bill. I appreciate that, and I think the board does. Any final comments, or are there any additional, Jen, I don't know if you have any final comments.
Well, my final comment would just be that I'm super grateful that you guys gave me the opportunity to address you and to answer your questions. And I am always available to answer questions. Anybody who doesn't have my cell phone number, I don't know if I want to announce it on a public meeting.
Yeah, you might want to email that.
Those people who already have mine, I know Ginny does, Dick does. Well, I don't know if Dick does, but probably Andy at least had it at some point. Janet probably does. Tina has it. So anybody who has it, some of you have it. If you don't have it, please. If you do have it, please share it with other board members if they have questions. You know, my door is always open, or my phone is always open, I should say, and I'm more than happy to answer any other questions you have about it. But thank you for the time. I know you guys are having a long meeting here, and it's 9:37 according to my clock, so I'll let you go with that.
And thank
you. I have
you.
your phone number if anybody needs it, but
I'm just not going to yell it out. But yeah, I'm happy to talk to whoever.
Are there any other questions on pre-filed legislation before we move on?
Am I good to sign off? Or are you guys?
You are. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Okay, thank you guys so much.
Okay, then we are moving on to questions only. Andy, I didn't know if you wanted to verbalize your question that you had emailed out ahead of time from the development tracker.
No, I'm not sure whether, I mean, Jessica's able to answer the questions right now, because I know that the meeting was Tuesday and tonight, so I'm not really sure she has the answers back yet. But I do have one other question.
Okay, then go ahead.
On the last page of the development tracker, F22024 Columbia Town Center is a subdivision plan. And it says for commercial properties on the west side of Little Patuxent Parkway. So that would be on the mall side. If you could find out some more information to exactly which parcels on that side of Little Patuxent Parkway are being subdivided, I'd appreciate it. Thanks, Jess.
Sorry, and can you repeat which item that is again?
Sure. F22024.
Which section of the development tracker is it? I'm sorry.
last page. It's the second one on the last page of the sheet. Well, what caught my eye was the west side of Little Patuxent Parkway, which is the mall side.
Yeah, let me double check on that one again, on what that actually is for.
Sure. Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah, sorry about that. Any other questions?
Sorry, I'm having trouble unmuting now. Sherry, you're up.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I had a question about the South Lake office building. Is there any regulation or requirement for a traffic study to be done?
That happens during the site development plan stage. So they just submitted it last week. And so as part of the county's subdivision review committee, they will have to undergo an ATFO study and do the traffic study per the regulations.
Okay, because what used to be there with the office building, there was also a parking structure. And I think that there's a parking structure that is supposed to be included in this. So that will be part of that study, I guess.
So, I'm sorry, there's a difference between parking and providing adequate parking for the development that you're proposing and traffic that is generated by the development. Can you clarify which one you're referencing or interested in?
Well, at one time I heard that the parking with the South Lake office building will also be open to people who are just using going to the lakefront. But that will certainly influence, given the number of offices that might be there and the number of parking spots that might be there and the amount of traffic that might be by that one light. So that would be included in the in the traffic study.
So what happens for developments, both in the traffic study and the parking, is that the parking is a function of the land use. So for commercial properties, there's a certain number of parking spaces that are required, typically based on the square foot associated with the use. And so that's the number of parking spaces. Whether that is required by the regulations, whether or not the developer is allowing other people to use their parking for other purposes, or if they have shared use parking agreements that factor in under regulatory allowances, those factor in separately. So the required number of parking spaces are going to be because it's a medical office building. That's how that's going to function. And then the traffic that's generated is typically based on whatever the county requires of its traffic studies. And that is a function of both the land use that is proposed there, as well as the existing traffic that is done through the traffic study, because you actually look at what's existing, and as well as the fact that the county requires to be applied to traffic, and whether they anticipate that it will increase or not. And then when we work in downtown Columbia, it gets a little bit more complicated because there's a lot of traffic management requirements and incentives, because we're trying to make a more walkable space. So there's specific requirements that the developers will have to meet that are really focused on the downtown Columbia and what we're trying to generate in that area. But as far as like people using that space to park and walk around like Kit, that doesn't factor into any parking or traffic studies. That's the developer's requirement to make sure that the functioning of their building functions while also serving this service that they want to provide to the public.
Okay, so it's going to have several different elements. That's what I was confused about. So thank you. I also just wanted to mention, and it's not on here, but I found out there is a Parks and Rec Advisory Board hearing on the Patuxent Branch Trail off of Guilford Road.
Yes.
That is going to be January 19th. It's a virtual meeting. It was switched to a virtual meeting at 7 p.m. And CI was involved in and the issues around the Patuxent Branch Trail. So that's something, I just got notification about that meeting. I'll be attending that, but anybody who's interested and wants that information, I'm happy to pass that along. And whatever you find out from that, if you can share that with the board also, that would be great. I haven't gotten any information about it so far.
Actually, I can provide some information on that because I had the bicycle advisory group meeting
Oh,
this
good.
week as well.
Okay.
Basically, that's moving forward with, I'm not sure, it's been a while, several years, but that, as you guys might be aware, that trail system is currently gravel. And there's a goal to pave it and to make sure that it's part of the active transportation network, since it's actually a major commuter line for a lot of bicyclists. But because it is maintained and operated by the Parks and Rec division, it's sort of an Office of Transportation and Parks and Rec's dual meeting. So they kind of are hosting it together. So the intent of it is to talk about the design to move that from gravel to a paved surface, including also adjusting some of the alignment where it comes out at Volmerhausen towards the Savage area. I don't know if any of you use that, but right now it sort of directs people down a private driveway. So they're trying to see if there might be a better alignment there.
And has anybody brought up the issue of flooding on that trail? Because I know that has been an issue in the past.
Yeah, I mean, it is located in the floodplain, and it's up against a steep ravine for anyone who knows the King's Contrivance area. So it is going to remain in the floodplain. And they're basically going to have to account for that in how they're designing it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to propose new topics. Okay. In the interest of time, I will keep my remarks brief. I just want to wish everyone a happy new year, even though it's 2 weeks in. So clearly, due to the rising COVID numbers, we will be meeting virtually in January, and hopefully we can reassess after that, but depending on how things are looking, that will be our process going forward. Thank you to everyone who contributed to tonight's meeting. Wes, thank you for your presentation, and actually Dennis and Dan, you know, a lot of great information for us, and appreciate our senior staff and the contributions that you make to the organization. And thanks to Delegate Terrasa as well for coming out to talk about her bill. And with that, I will also just say that prior to adjourning, we'll take a 10-minute break before our next meeting. So yeah, Tina, did you have a question?
I wanted to share, if I could, the Martin Luther King Jr. Holiday Commission virtual celebration will be released at 2 on Sunday. If folks can attend, that would be lovely.
Tina, do you think you could send that in an email?
I think that I could send that in an email, absolutely.
Oh, that would be, I have a terrible memory, and if I write it down here, I won't look later. So I do read my email though. So. Thank you so much. All right, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Ginny moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Dick second. Oh, well, Dick and Tina both second. Okay, so we'll take a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene at let's just say 10 p.m. for the closed meeting.